Thank you for joining me. I'll be your host today. My name is Reedy. I'm the co-founder and CEO of DataClassroom. And today we are going to go through data literacy in the wild. This is a series that we've done over the last 2 years, where we take a topic and we explore some data sets that can be used to teach within and around that topic. Um, Today's topic is pop culture data sets. So we're thinking music, celebrities, television, pro sports, those kinds of things that are talked about in pop culture, and things that you also can coincidentally explore through real data sets. That's one of my favorite things about teaching with real data is that you can dive into just about any topic. This is a huge advantage when you are trying to engage your students, and it's something I really like to do with students. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and just let one more person in as they're filing in. Um, and we'll go ahead and get started. So today, the general schedule for the 45 minutes we have together today, and forgive me, I may have been a little ambitious here. This is the order that we'll go, and we'll go from top to bottom. I like to plan more than I can get to sometimes, and even if we don't get to the end, I will send you all the materials for this in the follow-up. And just a reminder, if you registered for the webinar, you'll automatically get the follow-up materials, all the links, all the slides, everything that we cover today. So what we're going to go over today is these 4 data sets. We've got character age versus actor age in teen shows, and we can explore this question of how old are the actors that are playing teenagers on television. We're going to go through a second data set that's called the Bechdel test movie scores. And it's a way of looking at how common are real female characters in the movies and really distinguishing real female characters from female characters that are not fully formed, that are really just cliches in movies. Those don't count. We're just looking at how common are real female characters in movies. I found this fascinating in preparing to show you that data set. We're also going to look at a data set that we call Harry Potter house demographics. So looking at how do characters in the Harry Potter movies differ by the house that they're in across the 4 Harry Potter houses. And then the fourth one, if you're a regular webinar goer, you may have seen a little bit of this data set before. This is the Taylor Swift effect, and it explores the question of, did the Kansas City Chiefs play better with Taylor Swift in the stands? So looking at games when Taylor was in attendance last season and when she was not, and then comparing the Chiefs' performance by a couple different metrics on the field. We're a relatively small group, so if you do have a question, you can feel free to drop it in the chat. You can also feel free to just unmute yourself and interrupt. We can have a little dialogue. Actually prefer that. As many of you who've done online teaching know, it can get challenging to teach into the void for 45 minutes or an hour. We're just doing 45 minutes here, but if you have a question and you don't mind putting your voice on the recording, I would be happy to engage with you in that way. So this is the schedule. This is what we're going to cover. Let's get to it. And so we'll start looking. One other thing before we get into the first webinar topic, I also want to point out that 3 of the 4 data sets for today are going to soon be able to be found within the data sets on DataClassroom in the raw data. If you in the resource library, there currently is no way to filter out the raw data sets. But if you go to the data sets view, which is underneath the button that says My Stuff on the dashboard, if you look under that, you can filter data set by types, and there is this raw data sets. And the data sets I'm presenting you today are under development, but they are going to be in there soon. So you all are getting a sneak preview about a week before they come out. And the thing that makes the raw data sets different is these are open-ended. There is not a completely fleshed out assignment, or another way to think of it is not a rigid assignment that goes with these. So students are able to take these. We have some general prompts that can help them explore a data set, but the direction they choose to take these in can be their own. So there isn't just a set of 6 or 7 questions that they're answering, but it's more a suggested set of questions that they can use to explore a data set. And it even gives them the opportunity to identify what their questions are, so they can engage in something that's a little bit closer to authentic inquiry with these raw data sets. And again, 3 of the 4 data sets that I'm going to show you today are soon going to be available in that raw section of the resource library. So with that, let me get on to the first data set for today. And it is this one. Give my computer a second to catch up. So this is character age versus actor age in teen shows. I have a confession to make. This is my guilty pleasure for genres of television. My wife and I both are longtime fans of teen comedies and dramas. If for those of you who are in the waiting room a little bit early, the waiting room music was the soundtrack to the OC, which I still hold the position that that is the greatest teen drama of the last 25 years. I think it's an excellent show, but across all of these shows, you may have often asked yourself the question, how old is that person who's playing a high school student or who's playing a teenager? Often you have to almost suspend disbelief to believe that that person is actually a high school student. So students can use this data set to kind of explore that question. And again, this is a raw data set, which has some suggested ways to analyze the data set. But how you specifically choose to do it is up to you, or up to your students. And a couple of things that I think this data set is good for. I think that this data set is good for students who want to get a little practice using visualization to look for outliers. So if this is a data science skill that you are wanting students to learn, this is a decent data set to do that. They can also do graphing with general comparing groups graphing. So I mean, sort of when you have a numeric variable and you want to compare it across different values of a categorical variable. So sort of classic comparing groups. And to give you a little context before I switch over to the data set itself, all of the data sets, or all of the television shows represented in this data set, had the show's first season was released between the year 2000 and the year 2021. So again, all of these are from that time period. Stuff that's super recent, post 2021, is not included in this data set. The show also is being defined as like a teen show. Is the show primarily takes place either in a high school or centrally focuses on teen characters. So that's what's included in this data set. So let me really quickly switch over my screen share with you to share the data classroom link here. And I am switching this over on my screen and going back here, and I'll navigate to it with you. You can now see my data classroom dashboard. Also want to point out, if you're a longtime data classroom user, the dashboard look has changed recently. The content is still more or less the same. The import data, or the create classes button, which were before they were on the bottom, they're now moved up here to the upper left-hand side of the dashboard. You'll also notice that there is this help block, which was kind of there before, but looked a little different. And now these two lists of data sets here are recently visited items. So anything you open up is going to appear in this list with the most recent on the top. And then anything that's been shared with you or with your students. So if you share a data set with your students that you want them to do as an assignment, it will now appear in that recently shared with you list. I'm going to show you, if you're looking for this data set that I'm about to use, I can show you how to navigate there. If you go up to the My Stuff button at the top on the purple bar, and you go to Datasets, and this one is character age. So when I start typing in the word character, and sorry, I've got this filter on and I just made a mistake that you can maybe learn from. If you're not finding something that you know is there, look at what filters you have on here in the left. They're sort of highlighted with that faint yellow. And I was looking for only data sets that are owned by my classes. So that's my students and things I've shared with my classes. But I'm going to go over to the any so I can see all data sets. And now I'm gonna, in this yellow search bar, I'm gonna type in characters. And you can see I've got this character age versus actor age down here. And I'm gonna click this one. And so if you're following along and you want to play with this data set right alongside me, that's where you get it. I can also share this data set. I'll put a link in the chat. So I'm going to go over here and share, and I'm going to just get this shareable link by copying that. And so I've got that shareable link, and let me just share that in the chat with you all. 1 second. And I've lost my Zoom toolbar again here. Sorry, this maybe I'm not going to share that link with you right at this moment. Let me see if I can. There we go. I've got my Zoom tools back. Okay, so I am going to share that in the chat with you. So going to the chat, here is the link. That is the link to the to this data set. So if you want to open up this data set and follow along, you can do that. So this data set, again, how do the age of the characters and the actors that portray them line up? That's kind of our central question. With a raw data set, I just want to show you that there are 2 attachments that go with this. There's background, which is specific to this data set, and I'll open that up so you can take a look at it for just a second. And this is the background. Like I said, it is specific for this data set. It gives you a link to where this data set came from, tells you, who collected this data set, shows you, where they pulled the data from. And again, you can link to that data set there, and you can go see where we got the data from. It also has information about the variables. It gives a little bit of information about how those variables are defined. And notice for actor age, this variable describes the actor's age at the time the show's season 1, episode 1 aired. So I am aware that sometimes as shows goes on, as a show progresses, the discrepancy between the actor's age and the character's age can get larger. But this is the actor's age when the show started, and the character's age when the show started. So this is the background. There's also this assignment. And remember I said this assignment is not specific to this data set, but this is just a suggestion for analyzing a data set in general. And so this is maybe, a student who's got a little bit of practice in analyzing data sets, and you want to put them on a more open-ended task where they can be the driver a little bit more. So they're looking over this data set, and they actually state what their main questions are. And there's little blanks here for them to do that. It's asking them to create a graph that can be used to answer their questions. asking them if there's any appropriate descriptive statistics, things like mean or median or line of best fit, that they want to add to that. And so this is what you'll see with the raw data sets. It's a little bit more of an open-ended framework. I'm going to jump over to the graph tab for a second, and we'll start kind of exploring this. So the central question in this, is what's the relationship between the age of the actor. And so I'm plotting it, and you can see that the age of actors in a teenage show are, I've got a very large median dot there. That was for a better fit for another graph, but you can see that the age ranges from the oldest actor in the data set is like 32 years old. The youngest actor in the data set, there's a couple that are 11 years old. They are all, they're playing characters in these teen shows. If we compare actor age and we plot this on character age, and we add a line of best fit in a default state, it'll look like this. And we can look at that. We can start to explore this, and a couple of things jump out. One, you can see that the data are kind of concentrated in character age between like 14 and 19. And you can see that across the x-axis. That is where most of the data lie. But within that block, we see a range in actor age from up to about age 31 down to about age 14 in actor age. And so you can kind of see what the spread of the data look like there. One thing a student might want to do if they're diving into this is look at lay character gender on top of that. So I'm gonna click show, and laying that on top, we can see here we can look at the male characters are in purple, female characters are in that like teal color, and we can see, and this was kind of surprising to me, that the sort of general relationship between character age and actor age looks to be about the same across both those genders. And that's as evidenced as those two lines of best fit are more or less laid right on top of one another. There is some subtle difference in slope, but to the eye test, when I look at this, I would say that that's basically the same relationship across both of those genders. Another key way, or key data figure or graph that a student might make with this data set is to look at, I'm gonna just strip this off for a second, but to look at this variable of age difference. And so this is the discrepancy between actor age and character age. And they might want to compare this across the two character genders. And interestingly enough, this is another way of kind of looking at what we were looking at in that last figure. And again, I'm going to go in and change. I was playing around with different graphs, so I'm just going to go in here and change those dots on. Those are on the descriptive statistics. I've got those as right here. If I go down to the mean dot size, that was up at 19 point, which gives you those giant dots. But if I scale that down to like 6 point mean dot size, that looks quite a bit better there. But in looking at this, when we compare again the mean discrepancy for in between actor age and character age for male characters, 5.96 years. And for females, 5.93. So that's really almost identical, and no gender difference in that discrepancy between actor age and character age, which I found really interesting, because I've looked at a lot of these kind of pop culture data sets, and there's gender differences all over the place, to be honest with you, in looking at those. And it's kind of interesting that in this particular question, in this particular data set, there isn't really any kind of gender discrepancy there. And Anyone, I haven't seen any questions in the chat, but does anyone have any questions before I move on to the next data set? Okay, let me stop my share for just a second. And we're going to go back to, I want to frame the second data set for just a bit. And let me share that with you. Okay, so the next data set that we're going to look at is a data set that relates to something called the Bechdel test. And you can score movies as pass fail with the Bechdel test. And I had heard about this before, and it was interesting looking into the history of this. A cartoonist, Alison Bechdel, in a 1986 graphic novel that she authored, actually was just sort of making this test to sort of make a joke and to just make light of some of the gender discrepancies in movies. So there's these two female characters talking to each other, thinking about going to see a movie, and I've got the comic strip here on the screen so you can see it. But she says that she has three rules whether that will determine whether or not she'll go see a movie. And rule number one, the movie has to have at least two women in it. So it has to have at least two women characters. Rule number two, those two characters have to talk to each other in the movie in at least one scene. So it has to have two women in it. They have to talk to each other, and they have to be talking about something besides a man. So they cannot in their conversation be talking to each other about a man. They have to be talking about at least one other thing. So this is a pretty simple test. And interestingly enough, this was not written, this test was not created by any kind of media studies scholar or anything like that, but it has been applied to movies, and the results are really interesting. And that's what we're going to go ahead and look at in this next data set. So let me just pop over back to DataClassroom, and I'm going to navigate back to Datasets again, leaving this data set behind. And I'm going to search for the test movie scores, and you can see this data set is right here. And then does someone just mind confirming in the chat that my screen has tracked over and we're now looking at this Bechdel test data set? Can you see this data set? Excellent. Okay, so thank you for that. In this data set, again, there's a background, there's a general assignments that go with this. To sort of frame this, I'm going to go to the graph and we'll sort of explore some of the interesting questions. The first and most interesting question is just, how many movies pass or fail this test? And so if I click the show, we can look at this, and of these over 1,700 movies in the data set, you can see that 991 movies fail this test, and 803 movies pass this test. And so this is, I think, interesting in its own right. And it's to be honest, it's kind of shocking to see this, because that's just such a low threshold for defining, whether a movie has a real female character or not. And I see some comments, your expectations might have been even lower, and thought that it would be far worse. No matter where your expectations are, I would conclude that the movies maybe have a long way to go in reaching gender parity on this front. There are some really interesting things you can do to explore these data. This one is a starting. I chose to do it with a pie chart. I think you can also do it, with a classic bar chart like this, which is an interesting way. I'm going to move into graphs made with dots and lines. You can look at it as this categorical bubble, But I think it's also interesting to take these groups of movies, the pass movies and the fail movies, and look at how they differed in their budget, in the money they made internationally and domestically. So it's interesting to look at this. So one question you might ask is, looking at this budget, and I've got this pictured with off to the, you can see all of the individual movies, and I can hover on there to see this big budget outlier up here in purple in the fail pile is Avatar. Uh, this big budget in the past group of data sets, this movie is Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End. Um, and you can look at, these groups. When you look at I've got the mean and 95% confidence interval, the mean budget pictured off to the left of each of these. And I could just really quickly hide the dots, just to highlight where those are. I think it's a lot more interesting with the dots, so I will show the raw data. But you can see that the mean budget for the movies that fail this test is like $504 million. And the mean budget for movies that pass this test is $379 million. So movies that are in the fail on average are getting bigger budgets. An interesting other thing you can look at is, but how much money are they making? And so, like, if we look at total gross, so instead of budget on the y-axis, I'm going to look at total gross ticket sales. And you can see now the discrepancy between those two groups, those that fail the Bechdel test and movies that pass the Bechdel test, is actually a lot smaller. So the fail movies made about $240 million on average, where the pass movies made about $195 million on average. So that discrepancy gets lower. Another interesting way to explore those is to compare the budget to the gross revenue of the movie, like this. And so you can see that, yeah, on average, in general, as a budget of a movie gets bigger, it makes more, but there is a lot of noise around that. And one interesting thing to do is to explore the pass fail like this, and look at this. And an interesting thing is, for with fitting a linear model to it, for a lot of different values of X or values of budget, the predicted gross revenue for a movie that passes the Bechdel test is slightly higher than it is. And you can see the data are not evenly distributed across all range of budget. So at the higher budget range, it makes it a little bit harder to draw inference off of that. But it's interesting that certainly there's these data do not support the case that movies that fail the Bechdel test make more money. And that would be a sort of logical possible explanation for that discrepancy, but it's not. There doesn't appear to be evidence for that. It looks like the movies are grossing about the same, or based gross to budget ratio, movies that fail or that pass the Bechdel test actually might be bringing in slightly more money. So this is an interesting data set for students to explore. We are just about running. Oh no, we're not. Sorry, we've got another 15 minutes. So we definitely got time to look at one more data set, and then maybe a quick synopsis of another. So let me just flip back over to the slides for a second, and we'll go in, and I just want to frame our third data set on this topic that can be used. And this is the Harry Potter house demographics. How do characters differ by house? At this point, you have probably heard of these quizzes that will tell you which Hogwarts house you belong to. I'm Ravenclaw, by the way, but you will have no doubt have heard of these, if not taken one yourself. Um, and it sort of begs the question, why do fans of the Harry Potter movies and books have feelings about which house they belong to? Why do people care about this, and why do they continue to take these kinds of quizzes? And so we can explore a data set that looks for differences between the different houses. Some of these are well, they're all pretty superficial differences, things like eye color and hair color, and also what is the parentage of the members of these different Harry Potter houses. Um, so uh, we will be looking at this is a good data set if students want practice graphing and analyzing categorical data, because all of these variables are categories. None of them are numeric values. And then it can also give them some practice framing questions and using data as evidence. Just a note for context, these data come from the movie scripts themselves and from fan sites. The fan sites are potterfandom.com and pottermore.com. So you can take that with a grain of salt. This is not maybe up to the standard of like a peer-reviewed paper in a scientific journal. But I will say that the people who run Potter Fandom and Pottermore seem to me to be very serious. And I actually feel like they probably use some attention to detail when creating these data sets. But again, I don't know that I would stake my scientific reputation on it. I saw a question in the chat that I missed before, but it was how did you access the graphs? And just to say, and I'll show this again, those graphs, I was just creating those live in real time on DataClassroom using these data sets which exist in the DataClassroom library of data sets. So you can go back and you can actually create these graphs too. These graphs themselves are not saved in DataClassroom right now, although you can create them and save them to your own copy of the data set. That's no problem. But I was creating those in real time, and I'll demonstrate that again with this Harry Potter data set. Also, yes, I will be sharing the PowerPoint for this presentation along with the recording of the webinar. So if you want to actually go through click by click and watch me create the graphs that we used, you can do that in there as well. So with that, let me jump over to the Harry Potter house demographics data set. And again, I'm just going to navigate back there. So this is right where we left off before. And give my computer a second to catch up. It's resizing the window. But to get back here, I'm going to go up to my stuff up here, and I get the drop down menu. Within my stuff, I'm going to go to data sets, and it's going to ask me if I want to save any changes to this data set. You can do that before you leave it. I'm just going to discard those changes and go back to my data sets. Right now, I'm only seeing one data set here because I had started typing Bechdel into the filter. So I'm going to delete that. And instead, I'm going to type Harry Potter into the filter. And as I do that, you can see here is the Harry Potter house demographics data set. And I'm going to click it to open it. And so here I am at the Harry Potter data set. It has in total 128 rows. So there's 100, each row is a Harry Potter character. So there's 128 characters represented here. For each row, you can see the names of the characters, like row 1 is Harry Potter himself. You can see their gender, their job in the Harry Potter universe, which house they belong to. Harry famously belongs to Gryffindor, and their Patronus, their blood status, their hair color, their eye color, and then a listing of their skills. And a question coming into the chat: how would students get access to this data? Students can just go and make a DataClassroom account, or you can create an account for them by creating a class on DataClassroom. all the instructions to do that are up here in the help file. I can stick around a little bit at the end of the webinar and kind of walk you through that if you want. But basically, any student that has a Data Classroom account has access to all of these data sets. So they can log in to dataclassroom.com, whether it's through their learning management system like Clever or Canvas or Schoology or Google Classroom, ClassLink, etc., or whether they're just going directly to dataclassroom.com. They can log into these data sets. They all have access to them. But I'm going to go ahead and we'll play with the graphs here, and we'll kind of make the key graphs to this Harry Potter demographics data set. And one thing I like about this data set in working with students, you can give them this general question of, which Harry Potter house are you? And why do you think you belong to that house? So sort of a question that has nothing to do with the data, but just has them, thinking about what are the traits of the different houses and why would they want to be associated with one house over another. But then we can also look at how are the different houses portrayed in the books. And so you might click this button to show houses, and right off the bat, we can see that 40 or 39% of the characters in this data set are Gryffindor, 18% of them are Ravenclaw, 28% are Slytherin, and 13% are Hufflepuff. And then I think the fun thing to do here is to start adding another variable. So you can see I have house on X, and with this type of graph, you can't really put something on the Y axis. So you can add this as the Z variable, this extra variable. And so now you can see I'm looking at the 4 houses on X. You see Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, Slytherin, and Hufflepuff. And we have these stacked bar charts showing the proportion of characters that have these different eye colors. And you can look at, how these different houses, is there anything that's a key difference between these? In some of these, I don't know, Slytherin and Hufflepuff don't look all that different, although you see this bright green eye color, or you see this green eye color is in there, but there's no one in Hufflepuff has green eye color. But an interesting thing, when you look at Ravenclaw, 41% have dark eyes and 16.7% have silvery eyes, and 25% have gray eyes. So it's a whole lot of eyes that are either dark silver or gray in that house that are not nearly as represented in the other houses. So that's a difference between there. You can also look at maybe instead of eye color, looking at hair color and looking at these differences here. Ravenclaw is the only house that has anybody with white hair in it. But you can, kind of just look at these. Ravenclaw also has the highest percentage with blonde hair, followed only by, or second place with blonde hair is Hufflepuff. So you can kind of look at these differences in hair color. We could also look at blood status, and this is, what their parentage is, whether they had wizards for parents, whether they had muggles or non-magic parents, whether they had one magic parent or not, and are known as a half-blood in the book series. But you can look at this and you can see one thing that stands out is there are no characters from Slytherin that are Muggle born, and there are, a small amount of those represented here in yellow in the Hufflepuff house, in the Ravenclaw house, and the Gryffindor house has the most Muggle-born characters of all. So I see there's a note in the chat there. When analyzing survey data, can you have students calculate Cronbach's alpha using Data Classroom? If yes, can you show us how to do that? Currently, that's not in the feature set in Data Classroom to calculate Cronbach's alpha, but I am actually making a note of that, because we are talking about what's going to be released in the next package, and that is something we can consider putting it in the next package. Then I also saw the question of how did you get all the houses in there? And I'll just say, if I go up to this variable called house and I click on this values box, you can see all four of the values for this categorical variable called house. And you can see all four of them represented here. And anytime I graph this variable called house, if there are values in there, it will show them. And so when I placed house on X, it automatically placed all four houses because there are some values for each of those houses. So I didn't intentionally ask to get all four houses, but I just put the variable called house, and then it plotted the all those values of house there. Okay, so those were the three that are most new within the data classroom library. Two of those, both the Bechdel test data set and the character age versus actor age, those are actually just getting ready for release. We haven't promoted those at all yet. But this data set, the Taylor Swift effect, you may have seen before. We've talked about it in a webinar or two. And this one is different than the other data sets in that it's not just a raw open-ended data set, but it has a full activity for students to take on with a set of questions. We have answer keys for it that you can, or an answer key for it that you can request. In this data set, again, this is a complete lesson. One thing I like about this is it has appeal for the sports fans in your classes as well as the pop music fans in your classes. It's a really good discussion point for experimental design. This is not a perfect experiment because the only data we have to go on are the 19 football games that the Kansas City Chiefs played in last year. Or sorry, I think there's 20 football games represented in this data set. And it's not a perfect experiment. There's a whole lot of uncontrolled variables within it. But it can be a light-hearted intro into stats in Data Classroom as well. So with that, I'll jump over and kind of show you, basically what this data set is all about. I'm going to go directly to the resource library because this one is in there and has a lesson that goes with it. You can see that tile is right in the center of the top row. And I'm going to click this button that says Open Data Set, which, by the way, students have this button. They do not have the Open the Lesson Plan button there. So when I click this Open Data Set, I can see the data set. It has 20 rows of data. Each row of data is a different game. And if we want to ask this central question of, did the Chiefs perform better when Taylor Swift was at the game? This variable of was Taylor Swift at the game is really important. So when I plot that, we can see that she was in attendance for 12 games. She was absent for 8 games. Plotted a different way, I could look at it like that, or I could look at it like that. All of those, same data, different visualization. One thing, if we want to compare performance, one thing we want to look for some metrics of performance. I think the most interesting metric in this data set is the total yards of offense produced by the Kansas City Chiefs. And when I plot that, you get this plot, which is really interesting. And you can see that when I look at the mean total offense for the games Taylor Swift was present for, the Kansas City Chiefs averaged 375 yards of offense. In the game she was absent for, they only averaged 319. And a really interesting thing about this, if you run the statistical test here, and this is a t-test situation, and I'm just looking at this little pop-up telling me why a t-test is appropriate here, because we're testing for the average value between two different groups, and we're assuming normally distributed data. When we look at this, we get a p-value of 0.03, meaning that the chances of getting data like these due to random chance alone is only 3%. And scientifically, we would consider this kind of p-value strong confidence that the groups are different. So this is really interesting. But again, remember, this is a really good data set for teaching the limits of statistics and how your stats are only going to be as good as your experimental design. And this is far from a perfect experiment. There are so many uncontrolled variables in this. It's confounded with time. In the beginning of the season, Taylor was actually not attending games because her relationship with Chiefs star Travis Kelce was not public yet. So there's all sorts of reasons why this is not a perfect experimental situation. So we are about out of time. Once I stop the recording, I'll stick around a little bit and see if anyone has any questions. But as I bring this recording to a close, I just want to say, thanks for joining me today. Thanks for spending part of your afternoon with me. I also just want to leave you with this slide. If you have any follow-up questions, you can reach me at aaron@dataclassroom.com, and we'd love to take your questions. So with that, I will sign off and say thanks for joining me.